What is going on? What is going on? It is 1:30 in the afternoon. I can't hear the brother. I wonder if the brother can hear me.
I can
Um,
hear you, man. I hear you loud and clear. I'm here.
I,
You know what? I'm gonna start this thing off. Clap your glad hands for the great, the one and only, the Michael Seville, hailing out of Palm Beach County. He is your real estate king in business mogul, Michael Seville.
I appreciate it. And on the other side of the camera, we have the incomparable Mr. Joel Simmons, my brother from another mother of the Tenacity Foundation. We want to really get into it as we start our new series. But prior to that, the brother has some commercial for the gathering. I think I think we should get it done. Let's go ahead and get the gathering, and we could jump into this topic.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Joel Simmons. I am the host of It Starts With Me and the co-host of the Community Beacon. So, I want to introduce you to the gathering. What is the gathering? It's a male perspective group with biblical undertones. Well, it's a place where men can share their thoughts about real-life experiences without any judgment. Hey, we welcome all men to jump in this group where we share a lot of different conversations like defining masculinity, self-reflection, awareness, identity, building a strong foundation, emotional intelligence, well, a lot of stuff. Don't believe me? Check out these comments right here. Either way, there's always a seat here for you.
That's awesome. The brother had the shirt. Brother had the shirt. Now that was awesome. Great production, man. Shouts out to everybody that's in the gathering. Fellas, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, that video just sums up a little bit, just a small summation of what exactly goes on there. And I think there's a lot of change and growth within the gathering. And speaking of change and growth, we just finished up our series on the foundation of the man, rebuilding the man. That was our foundational series. And what I thought what was so interesting in regards to it was that there were a lot of things that we brought up that not only did we get a chance to speak about online, here online on the Community Beacon, but we also got a chance, and this is where I find the most growth in going back and really searching it. After we start speaking about these different topics, we start coming up with, oh, okay, starting to get different ideas. We start sharpening the iron. We had two guests to come on. We had Elder Ferguson, we had a Beethoven Francois that kind of spoke about their journey, and they added to the topics, which just makes it. I mean, this how many how many of us are spending this time? Like normally our shows are about an hour and 15 minutes. And to be truthful, we go even above and beyond because normally we're talking to each other for like 30 to 45 minutes after the show. So how much time are we actually spending? How much time are you actually spending to actually define these different things that I feel are very important, being a man, so on and so forth. Like, how much time are you spending? Think about this and then see how, and when you do start spending this time, how much it contributes to your growth. And an easy way for you to do that is to go back and look at the last 12 to 13 episodes of rebuilding the foundation and using it as a foundation as far as being a man. I mean, how awesome is that?
I love it, man. That whole series right there, it really gave me an opportunity of reflection.
Yeah,
Reflection. Number one, it made me feel like, we're doing the right thing. We're doing the right thing. There's a lot of things that I was able to learn, I was able to pick up. And so that was beneficial to me. It was beneficial to my community. Many of the brothers out of the gathering, they complimented on the style of work that we were doing, and they thought that it helped them in some way, shape, or form. But then it was also a bunch of other people, some new guys that showed up and that they were a part of this as well. And I just think that these are some of those things that just need to be spoken about. And it's not that
right.
just Mike and I are speaking about it. There's a bunch of people that are speaking about these things, but It needs to happen. And that's the bottom line. Because if nobody is talking about what is going on, then who is talking about what is going
Come
on?
on.
And that just behooves us. Be the one that's talking about the right thing at the right time in the right place. Martin Luther King Jr. said there's no wrong time to do the right thing.
Hmm.
And I believe that this is definitely the right time to be talking about the status or the developmental blocks of a man. And with that being said, I think it's a great segue for this new series that we're starting, Mind Mastery. This is huge. I
Yeah.
mean, there are some things that I'm already just the tip of the iceberg because I got to get into some studies about some of this stuff. I mean, I
Right.
thought EQ, I'm ready to go, but then IQ, ready to go, and then Mike dropped the AQ, and guess what? While I was doing the research, I found out that there was another one, and I'm like,
Oh.
oh my gosh! So there was like four of them:
Yeah.
EQ, IQ, AQ, and then there was SQ. And there's some other ones that are out there that give or take, whatever. But I was just like, man, this is heavy. This is heavy. So we're gonna be jumping into this thing and really opening up that door.
Let's start off with the first one. Everyone, this is probably growing up in the 80s and 90s. Some of us late 70s, in the late 1900s is what I heard a young child say. Growing up in the late 1900s, IQ was like one of the
What
it was
child was that?
IQ was like one of the big things. Everything was about IQ as we were growing up. I know as we went through school, we had the FCAT. I heard someone else say that you're old if you took the FCAT. And I was like, oh, I'm old. So you had the FCAT. So everything was really knowledge based. And it makes sense. And then put up the definition of it. Says the IQ or intelligence quotient. It measures the cognitive abilities such as logic, reasoning, problem solving, and analytical thinking. And that's something that we aim to practice, and I think we do on each and every show. We're not just taking things at face value. We're actually diving a lot deeper. We're going beyond the surface of a lot of the different topics that we're looking at, and we're coming from it with an open mind, which allows us to start to reason on these problems and then start to look at some of the blind sides that we have. This is like the equivalent of IQ, and then we have the numbers in within IQ, and most people know that. I think above 130 is like a genius, or 128 to 130 and above is a genius. Average is between 100 and 128, something along those lines, and then under 100 is below average. Um, but it was always a huge part of us growing up. What about you, brother? What's your take on the IQ?
Man, IQ was always one of those things. I was like, oh man, what do I do? Because for me, just growing up, I was that guy who finished all of his work early. I'm ready to go. Like, teacher promised me that if you finish all your work, you didn't have to do insert whatever. And I was like, all right. So I get in there and I bust out my work. My work's right. Okay. Now I got 10, 15 minutes in the class to do whatever I want. But then there came a time when I decided to become a radical rebel. And all of a sudden, science, math, electronics, technology, the whole STEM, everything, boom, it's just gone. And there was multiple years where I lost out on that. And so I felt like, my intelligence suffered.
Mm,
That's what I felt. I didn't realize that I had been developing something different. I had been developing EQ, and that started when I was young. So I was definitely concerned that I wouldn't be able to measure up with my IQ. No matter how hard I studied, I felt like I was always losing something along the way. I wasn't able to remember things well. So I just felt like my logic and everything was all messed up.
mm,
It wasn't until I got older that I realized that somewhere along the line, I just stopped caring about basic education. And so I don't want to put this out there like drop out of school or anything like that. I don't mean it that way. I just meant there's some things that I was learning that I just didn't care about at all. Now I've got a couple of degrees, so I've gone back to school, college, got a couple of degrees so that I can kind of level the playing field. But the thing that has helped me the most has been my EQ. And so that's where I am. I think you might do you have something for EQ?
I do have some for EQ. I guess in regards to, and I'll get into it. We have plenty of time in this mind master series to get into it. I got the EQ, the definition of that emotional quotient. This was newer. This was I remember there was a book that came out that really dove into it. Can't remember the name of it, but if I do, I'll definitely put it in. If you ask me about it, I'll go look it up. But it says this measures a person's ability to recognize, understand, manage, I love the manage, manage and influence emotions, both their own and others. Now that's interesting because now we start to get into um, I definitely agree. And we kind of spoke about this last week in regards to managing of one's own emotions. So for that, I think I have a pretty high EQ. Managing others' emotions is something else that I had to definitely develop and cultivate in regards to just um, seeing it. There were times when I just couldn't see past, you know,
Mm,
the IQ part of it, the logic and reasoning. It don't make sense. I'm a very data driven individual and interpreting the data. So then when it came to EQ, it was just like, like I don't understand why you can't do this. But then when you start to get into EQ, you start to understand. I love that understanding others, and then we often talk about this in the form of compassion and empathy. Like why can't this person get past this step? Well, they have
mm.
a whole lifetime filled of experiences that they're taking along with it that they can't see past certain things. And so that's where I'm at with the EQ. And you mentioned that this was something that you just started to develop. So what made you want to develop it? This EQ portion of it.
Oh, nothing made me want to develop it. It was just natural for me. So that was just natural, something that came by natural. I feel like logically IQ is a natural tendency for you. Ever since I've met you, you've just been high in intelligence. I'll never forget. Oh man. One day I'm sitting there talking with Mike, and Mike's just like, oh man, I just feel like, you can give me any subject and I'll learn it in 90 days. Now, he just said it just like so easily, like not like with a big ego, but just like the way he said it. I said, mm, you give me any subject and I guarantee I'll forget it in 90 days. Yeah, but on the other hand, as far as me being like, and I think it's just because the way I was brought up, man. My mom, she was just into, she was emotionally sound. My
Mhm.
mom is an emotionally fit individual, and so I picked up a lot of tendencies from her, having been brought up by my mother. And I think that, man, I just was connected that way. I feel other people, and so it wasn't until I got older, till
Mhm.
like the time somewhere in the time of me becoming a preacher, especially in the last decade, I started to realize that there's that I can discern. I have a rich discernment. And I started to realize that I can actually use that discernment. I can improve on that discernment. So maybe in like the last 5 years, the last 3 years especially, I started working very diligently on improving on that discernment. But probably in the last 10 years is when I started to really focus on that EQ.
And I think,
Mm.
and it's great that you mentioned it in regards to your mother and the way that you said that you kind of gleaned off of her and her ability to what you say? She's
She's a
emotionally
she
being emotionally sound person.
yeah.
And this is interesting because then we go back to the IQ and then we have the EQ. Is that how big of a role does the people that raise us actually play a part in developing those different, these different abilities? Because for IQ, it was, I could honestly say, and this is one of my memories, was my grandfather mentioning how smart I was and what it was I was going to do at a very young age, 3, 4, 5 years old. My mother also emphasizing that, my father emphasizing that. But for whatever reason, my grandfather's voice, like when I think about it, comes to mind. So then it was like never an issue. And if I didn't do well in something, it was because I didn't even try. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like I'm not even attempting to try, but we need to figure out like how not figure out. We can start to talk about how big of a role it is to kind of uh, to raise children this way, to raise children to let them know that, hey, listen, the reason why you're not able to do such and such is not because of you're not that you don't have the ability to do it. It's because you're not being, we're not encouraging them to do that. Not from a false bravado sense, but just exactly encouraging a child to say, you have high intelligence, you have high emotional things, and just and kind of bringing it up. You'll notice that, and I was listening to this guy talk. He said, "Oh, I was always a charismatic kid." Well, who someone had to tell him he was a charismatic kid for him to say that. So I'm sure he was around people, and they was like, "Man, he's so charismatic, or he's so sweet, or he's so something." And then you start to internalize that from young. So it's our environment, specifically our first authority figures, whether it be mother, father, grandfather, whatever it is, teachers, coaches, etc. They kind of push us in that direction of saying, oh man, this is a smart kid. Imagine waking up every
mm.
day and everyone's telling you you're smart. It's kind of hard for you to go against that, especially as a child. So it's always good to kind of encourage it and see. And I guess we'll really delve into the role that it plays in regards to our IQ and EQ. What do you think?
I love that. I love that. I definitely picked up on that and took a note. And then also another question that we should dive into is what are the benefits of increasing your IQ, EQ, or AQ? Um, this is a book that I mentioned before. I don't know if that's coming up in reverse or if you all can
No,
read
that's
it.
fine. We could read it. Peak.
Peak, and it's by Anders Ericsson. This book right here, just like when we start thinking about diving into that whole philosophy of increasing whatever it is, there's talents, right? So I'm pointing out one of my talents was that I was raised by someone who was emotionally sound, and I ended up having this EQ, a high EQ level, I believe, before it was measured, right? And the thing is that Mike, you asked that question. You're like, when did you learn about it? When did you improve upon it? And that's something that I learned out of this book is like Michael Jordan may have been talented because it ran in the family, sports ran in the family, but it was that his dad went out there with him and they practiced daily and they implemented steps to be the best. It was that, Mike, his his granddad is sitting there telling him about how he's so smart, he's a genius. These small things, as far as environment go, these small little measures, I call it, I don't want to call it dripping, but there's a lot of people, they call it dripping on people. You just drip on them. You have to keep that plant watered. When we start to water the plants or the plans of our desire, the vision of it's when we start to prep the grounds for our future, it makes a difference in what the results will be. So, as a parent or as a model, some type of figurehead in somebody else's life, the words that we say make such a huge difference in who they will become. because at a certain point in time, you begin to believe whatever it is that
Yep.
somebody is saying, and you internalize that, and it becomes fruit. It becomes a root that grows into a fruit. So I think that this is super huge. I think that what you're talking about is a really big thing, and I think that we have the opportunity when we start to write our own narrative to actually plant inside of our own vineyard, our own vineyard, whatever it is that we want. If I want to be compassionate, I can plant that. They
Yep.
call them affirmations. That's planting. We're planting, and I think that that's a big thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We often talk about the cultivating and the developing of all these different traits.
Cultivating.
We have all of these things. Like there's no one can tell you, regardless. You can feel a certain way about it, but looking back on it, no one could have told you that you were not intelligent. Because look at the result of it. Like this thing doesn't just come out of thin air. So you had intelligence. If we're talking about the IQ, I had EQ. I had an emotional quotient. I didn't till the grounds. I didn't water the plant. I didn't, you didn't water the plant. You said there came a point where I was just saying my IQ, yeah, I'm gonna, I forget stuff or whatever. So we tend to take these small examples and then we make it a rule. And then years later, we're like, well, wait a minute. How can the brother just pull out a Bible verse from out of thin air? Like these things pop up. How does he study it? How does he do these things? We can definitely cultivate and work on these through effort and focus. Michael Jordan. And that this kind of goes into the AQ. When we speak about Michael Jordan, the reason why he had the fire lit up underneath him was because him getting, and this is the story he tells, anyways, being cut from his JV or varsity basketball team in the ninth grade. And he said from that point on, he hung on the monkey bars to see if he can get taller. And what's interesting also is that I think he's the tallest in his family. He's 6'6". His son is like 6'1" or something. His brother was
Mm.
like 5'8". So it's like maybe hanging on the monkey bars does make you a taller individual. But after that, that happened, that set a fire up underneath him. So this is the AQ. So we have to say Michael Jordan has the adversity quotient, which the definition states is the measure how well someone can withstand and respond to adversity, challenges, or setbacks. This is resilience.
Resilient.
This is getting back up. This is facing challenges and not having a negative outcome of it. This is not failing, essentially. How and I'm going to be honest, I'm always honest. I think this is one of the failings in the community is this adversity quotient. We're too quick to label ourselves in some type of with given a victim type label and then accepting this identity and kind of playing up towards a narrative of that identity. Because once you accept a label, once you accept an identity, then you got to stand on it for the most part, and that's what we end up doing. So now we have this thing: when you face adversity, are we going to blame it on the? And this is not to say it doesn't exist, but what are we doing? Are we blaming it on the system, or are we saying, you know what? I gave it my best. I learned something, and I'm gonna meet the challenge this way, or maybe this isn't the challenge I'm supposed to face. But we have to have these thoughts. We need to talk about these different things. When I face a setback, when I face adversity, what exactly is my next decision? I saw someone once who, man, this guy, and God bless him, he ended up passing away of cancer. He was real young. Raymond, he played basketball at the center, and I remember he played another kid. Him and the kid were both about the same height. These were taller guys too. They were like in the eighth grade. About 6 foot, playing basketball. They played a one-on-one against each other, and Raymond beat this other kid so bad. He beat him so bad. This kid ended up never playing basketball again. Not
Mm.
for lack of ability or talent, but he made him look so bad, and he looked at it, and and this is adversity. So he could have went the way of Michael Jordan and said, you know what? I'm going out to this playground. I'm going to own my craft. I'm going to work on this game because the next time I play him, it's not going to be this way. But this kid decided that that was it. I don't play basketball anymore. Didn't try out for a team, didn't do anything. And I would imagine, this was the way that it was back then that he ended up not going too far. Um, but how do we respond to these different setbacks? Why do we respond this way? What's making us either go a little bit, like, is this something innate that makes us want to quit, or is there something innate in us that makes us want to keep going on? How are we kind of um what is this, a nature or nurture conversation?
Mm. I think you got both. I think that we would need to discuss both nature and nurture. And I love that. I just wrote that down. The effects of non use or improvement in these three areas. I think that that's definitely something we need to dive into. You gave, that's a great point. I mean, just when you think about that, this young man was shut down. And because of that, his talent ceased to exist.
Mm,
That's powerful. And when you mention that, even when I gave the example of how I kind of stopped working at my schoolwork and I just kind of like backed out of it. And the crazy part about it is, I mean, with the amount of books that I read and the amount of information I retain, that's the wild thing about it is like, I think I lied to myself. It's not even I think, it's like I lied to myself for years. And when you mention memory, Mike, that thing hit me because I mean, I went all the way to the bishop and I was like, I have a terrible memory. I want you to pray for me. And he was like, all right. And the crazy part about it is like I remember stuff from 25, 30, 40 years ago. I remember it. There's nothing wrong with my memory.
nothing wrong with it.
I had destroyed I burned the bridges of my memories by telling myself I cannot remember. And I did it for so long that I believed it. And that's like one of my no-nos. That's one of my no-nos.
Right.
One of my no-nos is never lie to God because who will you call when you really need help and no one else can help you? And never lie to yourself because one day you may actually believe it. I believed that lie. I believed it. I believed that I can't remember. I believed it. And man, when you just said that, I was like, that was me. That was me. Cause now I'm like, don't y'all remember this? We learned this. I'm going back 25 years. I'm looking at people, I'm reminding them of things that they said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you were standing right there when you said this in 2001. How come you aren't doing it now? You said it. You taught me. I was just a little kid. Mm. That's a real thing, Mike.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe that we definitely need to talk about this, and we need to dive into this AQ. This AQ. What was that? Aggression,
Adversity.
adversity. Yeah, adversity quotient. We need to talk about that.
And I'm so curious with this AQ, because these are new concepts to it coming out as far as AQ for me, at least in the last 6 months or so, is when I was made um, aware of it, or there was actually a word put to it, and how much of your ecology plays a part, and then really all of these things, really, right? There's a context also comes into play. Um, there's also here's the interesting part for us as well when we're talking about IQ and EQ, and I guess this is more EQ than anything, is that we know that the world plays a game, right? The world, there's a way that the world plays a game because people accept information. Most people only accept information how they believe it needs to be given to them. That's why we have a way of normalizing things. It starts off with just, you know I've never seen this before, and this is odd. And then we kind of creep, and you'll notice the more the more intelligent people start to notice, like, how can I get this to be normalized? It's not. I can't just come out and say this is the way it is. I got to kind of just inch towards it. So this EQ part, we know that the world plays this game with us, right? The world plays the game, and we're actors in this game of our own movie, but we're actors in this game. So how do we kind of take this? Because sometimes it doesn't make sense for me to be the smartest person in the room, and I do this a lot. I I play dumb. I wouldn't even say I play dumb. I just don't play smart. How about that? Or to my best ability because of the result that I want to see happen because of I need to see what's going on. This is an EQ part of it. So I think as we go along this, we dive into this subject to understand that this is a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about is going to be contextual. It's going to be a time. There's I've heard there's a time and place for everything, and there's a way that you introduce things to people, and all these play a part, and that EQ is going to be high on that level. Like how do I allow people to see me, right? And this is not to say that you're not in alignment. This is not to say that you are contradicting yourself. This is for this context, for this time. How am I allowing people to see me? I can't. There are times when you can't come off as with positions of strength because it's going to actually work against you. We talk about being masculine. We spoke about that in rebuilding the man. Now, there's times when we have to kind of pull it out, and there's times when we got to kind of allow this not to happen. There's an ebb and flow to this thing. And so, in regards to, and this is not to say that you're not a male or a man. There's certain times when you kind of puff out your chest, and there's times when your chest don't need to be puffed out. When you walk, so it's I think it's going to be interesting as we get into this conversation.
Yeah. Something came to my mind when you were mentioning how I think you said, how will I allow people to see me? Or I think maybe even to say, how do I show up?
Mhm.
Since we can't control what other people think or see or say about us, but at least how I show up. There's a man by the name of Hiroku Sanada, and he played Yoshi Toranaga in the TV show Shogun that was on Hulu. This thing, I think, especially for men, I don't know. I'm sure a lot of ladies liked it, but this thing like hit, and man, it just went through the roof. I mean, it hit a lot of those factors that attract men to TV series, right? But towards the end of that series, and you all should have seen it by now because it's been out for quite some time.
You about to spoil? Is this going to be a spoiler?
Nah, they're going into the new season. So sorry, guys. If you actually haven't seen it, then
I
maybe
haven't seen
you seen it?
I have not, but I'm interested now. But go ahead, I'm
Okay.
listening.
So this won't. I'll say it in a way that doesn't spoil it for you.
I
There's this
appreciate
one part where the man shows up, Yoshi. He shows up, and he actually presents himself in a very specific way, almost as in, and he does it actually a couple of times in a aggressive manner, but his mind is actually in pain. He's
it.
actually he's actually in pain. He might as well be crying. But the way he shows up is so firm and so pointed. He is looking for his vision to be fulfilled, his destiny to be fulfilled. And one of the things about emotional intelligence is there's two parts to it. And this is where I was thinking about the four different quotients, because the fourth one would be social. But I don't know why they created that, because really social has always been a part of emotional. And it's the second part. There's self and then there's social. And so with the social aspect of it, his thought process is, this is how I want
Mm,
people to see me.
yeah.
So he masked his self behind the social appearance, so that, and I mean, he plays the part so well that you never even know it. You don't know it. So if you were to go and watch it now, you would not know which part I'm talking about, because he maintains the same character the entire time, until there's this one point where he reveals himself while he's alone. And it's just like, that was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And they showed it so well. And this guy, Hiroku Sanaga, he's an awesome, he was in one of my favorite movies, The Last Samurai. He was the villain that played opposite to
Tom
Tom
Cruise.
Cruise. I know there was another guy there, but this is the one. This was the adversary that wanted to cut him into pieces and all that stuff, and ends up becoming one of his best and respected friends. So this guy is deep. He does an amazing job in that. But just to get back to that whole point of view, is that this emotional intelligence, it's like playing chess in some ways, shapes, and form. This is like the art of war type of stuff that we're talking about, because when you actually master this, then you have the ability to lead a room of individuals. You got it. Hold on. Go ahead, Mike.
No. That's it. That's it. Once you start, what really you want to master all of these things, right?
Mm,
No one's like we mentioned already, and we're going to come to a close. No one's, you know, unless you have some type of disability, and that's something else. That's something different. But for the most part, you can always cultivate. You can develop the IQ, to the best of you. And this is what we should do anyways, right? Regardless of the situation, is we need to develop these things: the IQ, the EQ, which is it had at one point in time become one of the most important things, even above the IQ. At one point in time, people were talking more EQ than IQ, and then now we have this adversity quotient because which is very interesting to me because I'm going to be honest. I keep saying that, but I'm always honest, and I think I do that just to kind of so people don't get upset. Is I get extra frustrated at people who kind of stop and aren't resilient. Like it was always very frustrating to me until I kind of dove into this adversity quotient and even being compassionate and so on and so forth. So what you mentioned, brother, in specifics to the Shogun example, I remember in training day they asked him about the streets, and he said Jake Hoyt said it's all about smiles and cries. You got to know when to control your smiles. You got to know when to control your smiles or your cries. Your cries
mm.
and your smiles. Learn to and essentially saying how do we manage this and how we show up. So I'm excited about this mind mastery series because this just takes. I think we've laid a pretty solid foundation in regards to men, and then now we're gonna jump into how do we how do we um, become our best selves. And this is like mastering the mind. We know what a man is. We know how we rebuild it. We know what this comprises of. And so a lot of us we should have been doing some work then. Now we're at the point where okay, now we're going to take it to the next level, which I think is the growth and all of the things that we do. So this is going to be awesome.
Yeah, love it, man. Love it. Love it. All right, fellas, ladies out there, y'all
Ladies and
enjoy what you got. Just remember, you've been blessed by the best to
oh, I
have
love that.
all that you have. So just take note of that, because it's not about what you don't have, because you could not have life, but you
Come on.
got that. So just be happy with what you got and continue to strive.
Appreciate y'all, man. Peace. See you next week.